Hey guys, today we're going to talk about top 5 Space Marine units, but these are going to be only the weird ones. And I'm not talking about the bad ones that I don't recommend you to use, like Reavers or Suppressors, which are just objectively bad. These are the guys that I simply don't understand for one reason or another. So hopefully that's going to be an interesting one, and let's dive right in. First unit on our weird list is Hellblasters. So Hellblasters were with us from the 8th edition. They were one of the first units released for the Primaris line, and they look very cool. The whole idea of a huge Space Marine in nice armor carrying a huge plasma gun is just awesome by itself. However, my biggest gripe with these guys is their lack of durability. I just don't know how Games Workshop imagines us paying 30 points for a Marine that doesn't have anything to protect him but his 3+ save. They are too sweet and juicy of a target to actually have them in your list, even if you use them very tactically, running them just only from the reserves or dip striking them if you have that ability in your chapter. They're still one shot, one trick pony, and then they're gone, probably, because whenever I see Hellblasters in someone's lists, and that's why I don't see them often, it's usually some beginners, and I just wipe them off of the face of the board in a relatively quick swoop, because it's not difficult to kill 5 or even 10 Primaris guys usually, even when they are defended by Transhuman. That means you don't have Transhuman for some other units that you have in your force. So yes, that's their biggest issue. Their firepower is actually not bad. You get quite a lot of shots, especially if you're running assault plasma incinerators, if that's what you like, and that's what I would probably recommend to do, unless you need to kill a -1 damage target, and you probably should not be shooting at that thing anyway with these guys. The fact that they're capable of killing themselves is probably the second biggest problem I have with them. It's just stupid. I understand the lore idea of plasma being so cool that and so destructively powerful that it can burn through a tank clean through, but it can also kill a Space Marine if you're very unlucky or too trigger happy. I understand that lore idea and I like it a lot. It's just plasma is not that powerful actually in real 40k on the tabletop, because we have the invulnerable saves, you need to hit, you need to wounds, and so on and so forth. So a lot of obstacles already, and after that you can even lose your guy just for the sheer audacity of firing at your opponent, which is what they are supposed to be doing anyway. I don't understand why that rule was not changed to something like your squad suffers a mortal wound for your troubles, which would be much more understandable. That even makes sense, because the Hellblaster box has a sergeant, I think, with a metal hand, meaning that probably his hand got burned off by a unlucky plasma overcharge, and it sounds like a mortal wound to me. It doesn't sound like a dead guy immediately. So that's my second biggest issue with them. Other than that, the concept is solid. As I said, they look great. It's a nice box. You have a lot of options there. And pretty much, if only Games Workshop would be able to fix their lack of durability, maybe with something like at least what they did to Havocs in the Chaos Space Marines, where Havocs for some reason were toughness 5, even when all the other regular guys were toughness 4. Maybe something like that. I don't have a clear solution at the moment. They would have to think what they can do, but certainly get rid of that plasma overcharge on ones, or at least do it like a mortal wound, because that craziness should only stay in Crusade for those guys who really like it. It's not for the competitive rules that we are trying to come up with here. Next are the Scout Squads. So these guys look very weird. They have only 1 wound and they have 4+ save. Then they are Space Marines anyway, which I find very odd, and I don't understand that. That all seems to grow from the initial problem of Primaris versus Firstborn, where you have to give people some reason to run Primaris, and you have to show them the difference, which they initially did by giving the Primaris guys 2 wounds instead of 1 on the regular Marine. But then in 9th they decided that it's too much and we want 2 wounds on everyone, but Scouts were left behind, so So that's now there are these weird 1-1 Marines running around. They compensate that total lack of durability with a 12 points of price for a guy, which is obviously very, very good for a Marine in general. And you also don't pay any extra for war gear, as we don't do that now in Arks of Omen. They are Elite's choice, weirdly, even though their whole idea suggests them being fast attack, and that would be so much better. But probably that's them paying for the sins of 8th edition, where they were just run as a cheap battalion filler, like the troops choice filler, where now they are sort of elites, but the whole idea of scouts is that they are recruits, not very experienced, so they are definitely not elite units, and that doesn't make sense. So if Games Workshop are so adamant about keeping things lore friendly, then scouts should go to fast attack. I think that's another thing I don't understand about them. As always, you can pimp out the sergeant with melee pistol combi choices. You don't have to pay anything for it. Now, all models can have camo cloaks, which obviously you would do, because that would give them 2+ save and cover instead of 4+, so they would be relatively hard to shift, especially for the price. One of the guys can take a heavy weapon like a missile launcher, or I think a heavy bolter, and all of them can have their sniper rifles instead of the bolt guns for that strength 4, AP 1, damage 1 sniper shot, so 6 to undo mortal wounds at 36 inches of range, and obviously ignoring lookout sir rule. Probably a better choice, and that actually can be very strong, I think, if you run a bunch of them with Iron Hands. The only limitation is the fact that they are elites, because you want a lot of elites with Iron Hands. You want a lot of dreadnoughts, but even one 10-man squad of these guys for 120 points, plus some eliminators in the back, that can be a lot of sniper firepower if that's something that you want to try out. And they have both the outflank rule, allowing them to pop up from the edge of the board, and concealed positions, allowing them to deploy not in your deployment zone and further than 9 inches away from their opponent, and that gives them an interesting maneuverability. So my main two problems with them: they don't feel like Space Marines to me. They should be tougher and slightly more expensive. Okay, they can be less, they can have a 4+ save, it's fine, I don't mind that, but they should have 2 wounds if all the other Space Marines have 2 wounds. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. That's the first. And second, they're just so ugly. I do understand why some people like Firstborn Marines, and some Firstborn Marines are actually okay in terms of their looks, especially those that came out right at the end of the Firstborn lifetime, like in 2016, for example, before the primaries came out. They were okay looking. But the scouts are just weird. They are small, they have these strange poses, and why Games Workshop did not release a single 5-man box even with fixed poses, it's fine. But just to give us an ability to build and paint some nice looking modern scouts. Maybe that's in the works for them. Maybe they're gonna do that soon, hopefully. But for now, that's my problem with scouts. And I'm not saying they're bad. That's the whole idea of the video. You can actually find a good use for them. It's just, I don't get them. Next weird stuff, the company veterans. I don't understand the whole idea of company veterans, why they exist at all. They have a typical veteran Marine stat line like the Vanguard and Stern Guard, and can be equipped with a variety of shooting and melee weapons, but they have less shooting available to them than Stern Guard, and no jump packs like Vanguard, and no 10-man option, 10-man squad option either. You have max 5 in the squad, but minimum of 2. Again, a very weird thing. I don't understand why there is an option for 2 guys. It's good for us to have that MSU 2-man MSU squad of Space Marines available if you need that. But why did they decide to do it like that? I don't get. Maybe I don't know something about their lore or something, but as far as I know, there is nothing that explains that, and why there is no Stern Guard 2-man squad, for example, or 3-man squad. They have the bodyguard rule, which is not that cool anymore because it's just a better lookout sir, and it never saved. Like, I've been playing with that new rule for a while now and never saved a character whenever I played, for me or for my opponents. It's just more or less a gimmick now, where it was a very powerful rule before, but was abused, so that's why they changed it. So yes, the bodyguard rule is something they have. They are elites, but don't take the slot if you have a captain in your army. That's good. Whenever you have something that can be free in terms of slots, that's nice. And also they have this weird company command rule where you can where you can get, if you have these guys, you get them for free in terms of the slot if you have a captain, and you can get a free, again, in terms of the slot, battlefield role slot, you can get company champion, apothecary, and ancient, again, all for free. You don't have to take up the slots for them. Is that important? I don't know. You would probably run the Primaris apothecary anyway. You'd probably don't run an ancient or a champion. So again, a gimmick thing. If you ever use that, let me know in the comment section below. I didn't. And my biggest gripe with them is the lack of flavor. I feel like they are this old leftover choice, which is there just because there was this thing in the box before, and Games Workshop really did not pay much attention to make them unique or make them stand out for us. And pretty much they are that one unit that you would take if you need something on your home objective, like 2 guys on your home objective, but you don't have enough points to buy a full 5-man troops choice, and you would choose these 2 instead. Which is okay, but that's pretty much it. And I don't like when something like that happens with a force, an army, a faction so flavorful like Space Marines. Our favorite Invictor tactical warsuit. How many times have we mentioned him on the channel? It's hard to count. The idea of a mobile, agile frontline support unit was always attractive to me and filled the role that Space Marines don't really have anything else for. Invictor always had decent shooting, good melee with that damage 3 fist, and I think he's strength 12 with that fist. So good profile if you need to punch something like a Terminator in the chest. He can do some damage with those 5 attacks he has. And he has a high move, 10-inch move, again, a lot, especially coupled with the concealed positions rule, where you can hide him behind terrain and then run out of that terrain and charge something turn 1. That's pretty much where all the good stuff ends for him. My main issue with him, and it always was his problem, that he has a problem with survivability. The Invictor is basically a toughness 6, 3+ save thing with no invulnerable save and nothing else. He has 13 wounds, which is a lot for a vehicle, but it's very easy to get through them, and the Invictor costs a lot. I think about 165 points, so you're paying quite a lot for that premium machine, for the ability to conceal position itself. And you're probably gonna lose it turn 1, and especially if there is no terrain to hide behind, and you're not necessarily getting a lot back, even if you're able to move out of cover turn 1 and charge. Because it's not like a 10-man Terminator squad, which will probably kill anything that it touches if it was able to turn 1 charge. Invictor will do some damage, but not massive damage. So as a distraction unit, he is good. But as a distraction unit, again, he is relatively easy to get rid of, and you are just giving your opponent free points at that point. Just an example, it takes about 30 Thunderhammer attacks to kill a Redemptor, and 20 attacks to kill Invictor because of the lack of -1 damage. And you can add to that the fact that Invictor doesn't have core keywords, so things like Dominus Aegis Relic for Deathwatch, for example, which gives 5+ invulnerable save to core units. It will not work for Invictor Warsuit, and all other buffs would not work for him as well. I think his survivability should be enhanced. probably halfway between what he is now and the level of Redemptor, and his price can be adjusted accordingly depending on how well he starts to perform. If everyone starts to run 3 of these guys and they're too good, you can increase their price to say 175, even maybe 180, so very close to the level where Redemptor is now, which would probably be fair at that point. So he needs to be tweaked because nowadays no one is running him, and as Games Workshop have said multiple times, they want everything to be viable. And Invictor, unfortunately, I don't think he's viable at the moment, but not bad, again, because a turn 1 charge with a 13 wound, toughness 6 thing with the fist is always a good thing to have. Now the Ancients. I love the idea of Bannerman. It's very cool that the most experienced and worthy veteran gets the honor of carrying the company or the chapter's banner into the battle, standard into the battle, and that it inspires all the guys around him to the feats of valor and courage. But, however, the problem with the current Ancients that Space Marines have is that they are not really impacting the game that much, only in very select few cases, but mostly no one runs them for the exact reason that they are mostly useless for players nowadays. What banner gives is within 6 inches, it gives +1 leadership and ability to, on a 4+, fight on death with 1 attack, which is already sounds extremely poor. And also you can instead fire 1 gun, which is probably better in most cases. That's an extremely restrictive rule, and it's probably the reason why I've only seen an Ancient on the tabletop maybe once, and I'm not even sure. Personally, I have 2 of these models. I have the Primaris Ancient and I have the Bladeguard Ancient from the Indomitus box, and I did not even assemble them because I know they're absolutely useless for me. And that's not good, obviously. Games Workshop should do something about them. They've tried to fix them by adding a couple of things that you can attached to the Ancient. You can invest extra 15 points to make a company Ancient a chapter Ancient, and that unlocks a command phase buff of +1 to hit in melee for a single core unit. And that's good if you're running a big blob of something like Terminators. That's great, obviously good to have. It can save you command points later on in the game for something like Fury of the First stratagem. For another command point, you can give him a Warlord trait Steadfast Example that gives OBSEC or double OBSEC to core units within 6. So it's essentially a more powerful Rites of War, with only drawback being that character units don't get OBSEC in this case. It's great to have. In some cases, it can turn the games on their head, especially if you're running a lot of elites like Bladeguard, Terminators, and they don't have OBSEC already. It's very powerful, and in some select few cases, like playing Deathwing, I would say that having an Ancient can be more or less an automatic choice, and I'll explain why. So say you're running Deathwing, you have a bunch of Terminators, Bladeguard, all that good stuff that cannot be wounded on better than force. So you buy an Ancient, you select the Bladeguard Ancient probably because that guy, apart from all his other rules, and he can be granted all the Warlord traits, all the upgrades, everything. But he also flat out gives +1 to hit for Bladeguard. So if you're running Terminators plus Bladeguard Veterans, which is, I think, a good mix, those Bladeguard will be hitting on 2s near him. He's chapter Ancient, so it means that you can select one of your Terminator blobs to have +1 to hit from him. He also will have the Steadfast Example Warlord trait for that double OBSEC, because your Terminators already have OBSEC, or your Bladeguard will get that OBSEC. So very powerful already, a lot of synergies going on at the same time. He will also be granted a relic called Pennant of Remembrance for a command phase buff on one of your Terminator units of -1 damage, and I would recommend to have at least one full 10-man unit just to have that buff on them, and advance them as far forward as possible to make sure that your opponent has to concentrate their firepower on that unit. and therefore suffer all the consequences of -1 damage from your relic. And here you have an Ancient who has like 50 auras, a bunch of command phase buffs, and he only costs like 80-85 points for you. And you also don't spend the elite choice on him anymore. So in this particular case, I would say that Ancient is a very good choice. And maybe there is like one or two other ones I could come up with. But other than that, if you're running Space Marines, Ancient is a more or less useless idea, which is bad and should not be like that. And I hope that Games Workshop changed that in 10th edition that is coming up soon. So these were my top 5 weird Space Marine units. These are the ones that I think are good, in some cases very good, but are weird nonetheless, and probably should be changed in the near future to be more easily understandable and utilized. If you have any other suggestions of what you consider to be a weird unit, I would love to hear that in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.